Hey, Will, if we're going to be a semi-professional outfit, you need a green screen.
I need a green screen.
Yeah.
I need to get a
And
green.
you can get a green screen that will attach to the back of your chair. You
Yes.
look a bit like
Those are
Morticia.
cool.
But it's one thing for our guests to look unprofessional. They don't know any better. It's another thing for our hosts.
I will get a green screen.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits, or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, Kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield and our special guest, Brian Dolan. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
So I got some stuff, Will. Did you prepare anything for banter, or is it just me again?
You
know,
how is
I'd be
that
mad
for
at you if
confident
you brought
preparedness?
stuff.
I'm just used to you starting some kind of, thought train or.
I'd be mad at you if you brought banter, because that's my
Right.
thing, right? So good.
I
So
don't
you're
wanna get in
living
your
up to
lane.
expectations. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming unprepared. It works out.
That's what I'm here for.
It works out great.
I'm your
So
foil.
I was thinking, what do we call our ever-growing legion of podcast followers, work in progress followers? What would you think we should call them? I have an idea, but let's hear from you.
Whippets.
Yes.
I was going to say whippers.
Whippers. Okay.
Whippets.
Whippets
is something else, right?
Whippets
Not that I
is
know it.
something else. That's
I
somebody.
didn't
That's
do that
somebody who's
many of
lived in
those.
It's
the
a small
80s,
dog.
Brian.
Yeah.
Kind of small dog. Right?
Oh, that kind of whippet. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're whippers. So we're officially in episode 16. We've got a name. Now we just have to get it to stick. So that was good.
Yes.
We also have something new, which will come out in the bloopers section, which is we have a new tagline for bloopers. Remember what it is, Will?
Oh, no.
Learn from our mistakes.
I'm going to learn from that one.
That just came to me when I was writing the show notes for, I think we were publishing episode 13. So that was fun. So let's just sort of do state of the pod. We now have, our followers have a nickname, Whippers.
Yes, Whippers. Mm-hmm.
And we have a sub tagline. So we actually have a brand architecture. How crazy is that?
Honestly, given your creativity and your beautiful mind, it's not crazy. It's shocking to me, to be fair.
And then homework, float up. Ooh.
Look at the power of tech.
All right. And so, again, to the nice people at who bring us this magic software, I don't have a pointer. And Will, I have some news on them. I don't want to say it on this pod, but it could be something interesting between us and in a week or two. But we have an architect, and we'll explain what that is. Frankly, everyone who's watching knows what an architect is at this point. But Brian is an architect, and we're starting to fill out the architect section. Experts is still only 2. We have an expert booked for later this week, and there's a story on that, so we'll get to that. And no facilitators, so we have to work on that.
What's up with that?
I don't know. Facilitators are totally social people, and the fact that we have not had any is of interest.
It's not an intentional bias.
It is a bias, but it's unintentional bias. So, I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
And we are
a work in progress.
All right, so you come on back down. We're going to introduce Brian, but I forgot to move back to our standard. What a high quality production we have.
It is nice.
Back to that. And introducing our friend and guest, Brian Dolan. Brian, introduce yourself to everybody.
Hey, I'm Brian. I'm the CEO and founder of WorkReduce, and we provide staff augmentation and managed service to ad agencies, in-house media teams, ad platforms, companies like that. Company's about 8 years old, and primarily US based. We do have a team in South America as well.
Cool.
Hardworking friends in Central and South America. And, we work across the kind of media investment spectrum. So everything from media strategy and planning into paid search, paid social, display, things like that, and through to analytics. And we're heavily focused on the kind of execution side,
Cool.
pulling all the levers that are required in making a media plan active.
Very cool.
Nice.
And everyone on your team is remote, is that correct?
We've been fully remote the whole time. Certainly looking at the hybrid model right now because we have clients who are returning to the office and have kind of constraints around that. But we are a remote first company, and I love it.
Yeah, you guys were ahead of the game than others. So, Will, any thoughts for Brian, or should we jump in?
I'm sending him a LinkedIn connection request right now. That's what I'm doing on my phone. Brian, how do you know John? How did you get pulled into
Oh
this?
gosh, a while ago, right?
Yeah, so John was introduced to me, I guess, through our mutual friend Eric, right?
Mm-hmm.
And became an investor in the company. And we've worked together in a range of capacities for the past, 6 years, John?
Something, 5, 6
Wow,
years.
great.
6 years, something like that, yeah.
So it's pretty disingenuous of me of asking questions and pretending I didn't know the answer.
Well,
Well, thank you for coming aboard. I don't know you from Adam, so we'll have fun today.
Absolutely
Wing
will. Okay, so let's jump in. So as everybody knows, we talk about Kryptonite and superpowers, and the way we reverse them, superpowers and Kryptonite. The way we identify those superpowers and Kryptonite is through the OAD survey, which we'll talk about. Super easy to take, and it generates
10 minutes.
very specific, very accurate information about the person who took it. Will, read my brain. What am I asking? What am I going to think? What am I going to say?
I think you are going to say to Brian that you would love to know how he feels about having his entire personality reduced to a two-dimensional table.
I was going to say that, so let's ask Brian.
Well, it's I like it because I think it's relatively accurate, right? Maybe it doesn't capture some of the nuance, but it's at least as good as my astrological sign.
That's coming out in editing. We don't edit. It's not coming out. Well, let me break this down for my skeptical friend Brian here, just so everybody gets it. So Brian is in the quadrant architect. That's the upper left, which means he is a technical generalist. He has 2 dominant traits, which are patience and assertiveness. And he has 2 subordinate traits, which are extroversion and detail orientation. And we're going to break them out through the discussion of superpowers and Kryptonite. So the upper left quadrant, we talked about that earlier, are people who are typically very direct with high confidence. And so when you're in a conversation with them, bring your data, bring your information, because they're going to ask you questions to try to get to the answer. So
I do ask questions.
You ask a lot of questions, yeah, which is good. I mean, good for you. Okay, so let's get into your segment of the show. Go.
Well, welcome to the Architect Club. It is an elite one, Brian. Glad to have you in there with me. One more architect, and we got a starting 5.
That's true.
Not as elite as the facilitators, apparently, if you can't find any of that.
That's exactly what an architect would say.
They're avoiding us. But this is the general, characteristics, Brian, for someone who's going to land in the architect quadrant as an independent generalist. You and I are going to have similar bullets here. Of these on this just generic page, is there one that really leaps out at you as accurate, or you've heard about you before, or you feel was on point? That's, more accurate than your astrological sign.
Yeah, I think the conceptual one is one that really resonates with me personally, and in terms of the feedback I get, right? Just thinking through the big picture of things, and approaching the world with a systems thinking approach. So I think conceptual is the one that hits pretty well on there.
Got it. Mr. Lane. Moving to the Kryptonite, right? So, Brian,
Good
I'm
stuff.
sure this very rarely happens to you where you feel pressure or stress. But in those rare moments when that
Almost
does
never.
happen, happened to me once, I think. On the rare occasion that occurs and those superpowers invert, right, and become Kryptonite, strengths become weaknesses. What is it one on here on this kind of general readout that speaks to you?
I mean, I would say, those first three all kind of come together into one thing for me. You know what I mean? It's like when, like just things build up and I've got too much going on, it just becomes really difficult to follow up and communicate, right? And juggling the priorities about what to follow up and communicate around. So like those turn into just a single kind of thing, for me, where I just I can freeze up a little bit, right? And it's just challenging to manage that, right? Because it's inevitable to happen. But for me, I really try to like make sure I'm not going too hard all the time, so that I can have a little bit of space and room to avoid that, because it's happened to me so many different times in my career. Either running this business or back when I was a software engineer. Just it's easy to say yes to a lot of things, and then the pressures build up, or things independent of what you said yes to come to a head, and that just gets crazy. So I try to pace myself.
Well, I
It's
think
a
if we've
marathon,
heard one
not a
thing
sprint.
consistently across the Kryptonite spectrum of all the folks we've talked to so far, that yes to too much it's almost universal. And I think, the type of
Yeah.
people we brought in are more yes sayers, but they come at it from different directions.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're saying yes to going on a podcast, you're definitely in the mode of saying yes to
Yeah, what do
things.
you
And I
think?
think that's a good place to be, but you just got to balance kind of what you're saying.
Yeah,
Saying
agreed.
yes to make sure it's a priority.
No, I think you're right, John. Actually, my wife, who is a loyal listener, brought that up to me recently about the number of people who have mentioned that as a weakness or a kryptonite or a fail for them has been, the struggling with no or saying yes too much.
Yeah,
And I think it's part and parcel with the leader profiles that we've been,
I think that's
interviewing
right.
on here.
I think that's right. Yeah.
So Superpowers, this is where you kind of commented back to us, Brian, about things that stood out to you and points that you wanted to make. So we can spend a little bit more time here. If you kind of talk us through your feelings about the results of the OAD profile on you, and your role as a leader in professional situations and social, personal situations, and why these are traits that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be like an actual architect, right? So I've always loved, schematics, right, and designs and maps and things like that, right? So I definitely have always really thought about like how things are connected, and how, whether it's a software system, whether components of the software system are talking to each other from a software architecture perspective, or thinking about how do we architect the business that I'm running now? How do the different components of that business play together? How does the data from that's generated by each of those kind of business components work together or inform each other? So it's definitely something that's resonated with me quite a bit here.
Got it. Yeah, as we look at these and think about strengths, and you talked about the business that you founded and roles that you were in before. The John, can you pull up his readout, please? So you and I are both architects, but I mean, wow, look at that, how we're leading with patience, and what a strong trait that is. How do you, that just really leapt out at me when we were on the screen earlier, and it's something I
Mm.
wanted to come back and point out when we were talking about strengths. John, can you help us a little bit here with
Yeah.
kind of what that great distance between P and D, that patience or that detail orientation means,
Yeah.
dominant versus subordinate, because I think it has a lot to say about how he operates as a leader.
I think well, we're gonna talk about this a little bit because the high P is patience, but it also is somebody that likes predictability. So when I hear somebody who is a software engineer, I think of somebody who um, figures out a process and uses that process to build the software that they want to build to solve a problem that they know exists. And so that patience comes into there, that persistence comes into there. And then we have the detail orientation, which is not really attention to detail.
Correct.
That's a thing we've heard a little bit. It's more the ability to be flexible. And sometimes people who are flexible are also good at delegators. And Brian may not feel that the delegation part is true.
I'm
But
definitely flexible.
definitely flexible. That's right. That's right. So that high P, low D is a persistent, flexible person who may or may not be good at delegating. And again, it doesn't. This is why we ask you to personalize some of that. And so when you came back to us, you said, "I wish I was better at delegating." So I kind of changed your words a little bit to say your independent generalist is typically a couple of things, is typically a good delegator, but is also a natural skeptic and slow to trust.
That's yep.
Yeah,
So
and
that,
so some of that slow to trust may
Yeah.
be why you're reluctant sometimes to delegate.
Yeah,
you
well, I think I'm not reluctant to do it necessarily. It's just that I'm not necessarily great at it. Like whether it's finding the right people to delegate to or setting clear expectations. It's definitely like an area of kind of ongoing work for me. Like
That's
you
good.
are running a business, you are forced to delegate. Like you can't
yes.
do this
Have to.
without, you just keep, it's great because you can't do everything. So there's just no way you can run the finances and find the people and like
That's right.
execute and do the sales.
Legal,
And it's like
HR. There's too many
there's just
different
too many
functional
taxes. I mean,
skills.
just
Yeah,
come up, name a thing, right? And so the complexity of it, no individual thing that you're trying to do is super hard, but you've got to do a lot of different things. So, um, and being able to set clear goals and expectations for people, right, gets back to the kind of communication side of things. Am I communicating my needs? Is it all kind of get it all from in here to come out here, like we were talking about before?
yeah,
I think is a real challenge around delegation. But yeah, I'm definitely you got to be flexible.
yeah.
I think if you're going to run a company, right? Like
I think so.
things will surprise you. It's always going to be something that you weren't expecting. It's going to come up, and just have to be ready for it. So I think it's a good characteristic to have in
Yeah.
somebody who's trying to run and grow a business.
Quick question before we leave the slide, and then we'll move on, John. But the point I wanted to circle back around to was this delegation piece that you brought up earlier, and as small business owners here on this podcast, and as leaders, this is the question I'd like to ask you, Brian. Do you find that it's more about, do I have the people around me that I know I can hand this off to, that they will deliver? Is it more about, this is a really important, critical thing, and gosh, I know for sure that if I do it, it'll be done right? Is it more about ownership? Is it more about hiring and developing people that you can trust when you delegate? What do you think's most difficult, handing it off, or putting
I
the
think
right people in place?
it's a little of all of those things, and like because it varies by, if you look at what I'm handing off, right? You've got elements of all of those where, hey, maybe I've got the wrong person, doing the books, and I
Right.
got to fix that problem. Or maybe I've got somebody who is really strong in like one area, and then we got to figure out how do we build them up in another, to match those strengths. And to me, it comes back in a lot of ways to just having very high expectations, sometimes too high. You know what I
Great
mean? Like,
expectations.
I'm a super perfectionist, and it's easy. It's much easier to like point out problems in other people's work than to like get it right yourself. So it's like, hey, delegate and criticize is, I think, a trap to kind of
You're the
fall
editor.
into.
You're the editor. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so as opposed to, it's better to be able to express what you need and want up front. So you're setting those like really clear expectations as opposed to not setting them and then coming back in and being that kind of seagull manager
Yes.
who's just coming in and shitting all over things. 'Cause that's like the lazy. Oh yeah, sorry. That's the lazy.
I have to learn how to do beeps
lazy
anyways,
approach.
Doug. Thank you.
I'm
So
dropping
seagulls
way fewer f bombs than usual. You know, so yeah, that was pretty good for me.
That was good. You made it 32 minutes, so that's awesome. So I'm going to put a button on this and just
Please.
say, because I coined a phrase, I'm calling it the architect's dilemma, which means you got a whole script in your head, but only a few words make it out of your mouth. It makes sense to you, but from the receiving end, it's like a little more, please. And so and as you're under stress, fewer words come out, even though the whole script may be going on in your head.
Yeah,
Well
yeah,
said.
definitely. Like, it's worth, like, I think, trying to put down the framework in writing. You know, that's very helpful when you can do it, and
Yeah.
also kind of dual code things. So if you can diagram and write and have both of those in play, then I think that really helps people kind of see what's, you know, up there that I can see.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
I don't know.
nonverbal. Yeah, your nonverbal stuff maybe makes up for the verbal. I'm going to point out persistent, because that's going to come up on the next slide. Too persistent. Will.
So we'll dig into your kryptonite here and pick at your pain and test your vulnerability here. Talk to us about these things that you plucked from the results and,
Sure.
and why you wanted to talk about them today with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has, and back to the astrology, I'm a Gemini, right? So you've got the twins, right? And like for me, like the two sides of the coin are being like, on one hand, being very kind of driven and high achieving, and on the other hand, fundamentally just wanting to lie on the couch. Right. So, like, if you read some of Anthony Bourdain's biography, I think he talks about basically how he's tricking himself into, not just sitting around and doing heroin all the time. Right. How do I trick myself to get like one more thing done? Thank God, like, that's not a specific problem that I'm struggle with, but it's like, like, okay, how do I set a routine, or how do I just do one more thing? Or what is it that I can do to like trick the lazy side of me that wants to kind of come out into getting up off the couch and going for a run, or cleaning my apartment, or whatever it is that will kind of like move the day forward. So I think there's just something there that's always a pull, like literally the gravity of the couch or whatever. It's always pulling me, and I'm struggling to kind of work against that. So somehow in this one I kind of ended up on a different path. But a lot of it does come back to, and when we move on to the kind of pulling back and lower communication level,
Yeah.
Like, I always love, I don't know if you ever saw this, episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns goes to the doctor, and they're like, Mr. Burns, the doctor's like, Mr. Burns, you have everything. We call it Three Stooges syndrome. And he shows like a bunch of germs trying to go through a door. And it's like, look, because you have so many things, none of the germs can get through. And Mr. Burns is like, well, I'll live forever, But and the doctor's like, no, you're just a hair's breadth away from everything collapsing. And I feel like, for me, it's like too many germs will come through the door, and then everything gets stuck, and it doesn't give me this Mr. Burns feeling of like, hey, I'm going to live forever. But like, it is the Three Stooges. It's like Moe, Larry, and Curly. They're trying to go through the door all at once, and like all of a sudden, like nothing's happening. Like you're just blockaded at the door. And so I have to structure again. That comes back to structure. It's like I've got to structure my life to like avoid that, right? So And for me, it's like, hey, look, if I don't get like a weekend away here and there,
Mm.
because like running a business is always kind of there, even if
Always
you're
there.
away, like,
Always there.
but I've been trying to like schedule vacations like in advance, not just like last minute and whatever. So I've got like downtime where I'm like totally unplugged, going somewhere, doing something that I know is going to like relax me. I just went skiing. That was actually like a last minute thing, but just trying to just totally unplug so that I come back and like Mo, Larry, and Curly are nice and in orderly fashion coming through the door. You can kind of deal with them with more energy and stuff like that.
We haven't had a Three Stooges or a Simpsons reference yet, and now today we have both.
All in one.
Thank you for that. I always love a Simpsons reference. One of my favorites. John's got a Simpsons background that he occasionally will throw up.
I just saw that. Yeah,
behind
my
us.
my director of marketing is lives on the same couch.
Dun, 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 dun,
Perfect.
dun, dun,
I
dun.
see a still shot of this coming in promotions. But before we leave the slide, and then we'll smooth out after this to kind of closing with the time together, Brian. It sounds like that you already have a lot of self-recognition. You're putting systems and processes in place to help yourself, to trick yourself, whatever it needs to be in order for you to accomplish the things you have to accomplish as a founder, business owner, as a leader of people, as
Lover.
someone of family dynamic. So yeah, everything.
All of it.
Did you find when you took this, assessment that, not only was the results relatively to closely accurate, but also pointed out to you some of the things that you already self-recognized as weaknesses, holes, kryptonite, which you've already been managing around? Was this reinforcing this exercise?
Yeah, well, I would say it was mainly reinforcing for me, but it was very interesting to see how this framework worked. It's very fast. So John was trying to sell me on this. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have time for this stupid quiz. Like, what the hell? And I was like, oh, fine, I'll do it. And it was like really fast and easy. And compared to say like a Myers-Briggs or something, I find that the relevance of the categories is actually pretty high to how I think about the world, right? Like I think, obviously there's a lot of competing frameworks, like including astrology.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like in terms of how to think about yourself and your life, and it's like there's no wrong answers in a lot of ways, because I think about, even if you take it back to like to the astrology one, obviously it's completely random, right? There's zero scientific chance that any star is going to align and kind of change your life, but it becomes a kind of Zen cone to like reflect upon. Hey, here are these like open-ended things that you can reflect upon. And this, I think, was a little bit deeper into, for somebody who's running a business and active in the business world, thinking about concepts like persistence that's one that I don't see in a lot of the other ones, right? So I think that's really helpful.
That's great. So you'll take some of this home with you to work. So like how does some of this stuff you think about this as a leader? Because a lot of the work Will and I do are on the leadership side. So a lot of it, Will hires a lot of leadership people.
Sure.
I work with leaders and their teams to understand like how under stress, if I don't communicate well and then the meeting breaks up, we're likely not going to get the result that you're looking for.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Well, I would say, this is reinforcing for me, that I need to spend a little more time kind of writing down the priorities. And this is stuff that like I've had executive coaches who have said the same thing. It's like, spend more time documenting what you're trying to tell people, because you think that you're getting it all out and you're not. So like I've heard that a bunch of times, and this definitely like reinforces that, I want to sit down and kind of codify what, say, like we did in our last executive summit, you know what I mean? And make sure that we've got a nice kind of consistent framework for the leaders under me to follow as they lead their teams.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Well, why don't you take this one?
Okay, Brian. So the life of this show and the future of this podcast hangs in the balance every week. We succeed or fail based on who's next.
Mhm.
And we'd love to know who you think would be, from your network, an excellent suggestion to guest on this show with us based on this experience that you've been through and the pre-show torture that wasn't recorded.
I would say, what are you looking for others? Like, what's the profile you're looking for?
We're unbiased. Who do you think would do good on this?
Who would benefit from this?
Would
Who would enjoy it?
benefit?
Who would be a unique interview? Who do you owe some money to?
Or who owes me money?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
I will. So how about I'll nominate Rachel Barrick, the CEO and founder of Said Differently, which is a creative agency.
Love it.
And
Beautiful.
we'll work with you on communicating with her. Thank you so much.
Correct.
Yeah, you bet.
That is the end of our
That's
time.
us again.
Yeah, we thank you so much. Everybody
My
knows.
pleasure, guys.
Was that?
I said, my pleasure. Great to be on.
Yeah, it was good. It's good to see you. It's definitely been too long. And DC is not far from Raleigh, so come on down and see Will and I sometime. I'm John Lane.
I am Will Barfield.
And we are all a work in progress. Thanks,
Really
Brian.
appreciate it. Thanks, Brian. It was fun.
You bet.
So, but all of your diseases are in perfect balance. If you have a moment, I can explain. Well, here's the door to your body, you see? And these are oversized novelty germs. That's influenza, that's bronchitis, and this cute little cuddlebug is pancreatic cancer. Here's what happens when they all try to get through the door at once. Move it, shout ahead. We call it Three Stooges syndrome.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.